Giaguit, hello. Welcome to the podcast series of the Center for Irish Studies at Villanova University. My name is Joseph Lennon, Emily C. Riley, Director of the Center.
And I'm Jennifer Joyce, Assistant Director and Curator of this series. We appreciate the support from our many donors, especially a generous grant from the Connolly Foundation.
Irish Studies at Villanova has existed for 40 years, and in that time, both Ireland and the Irish diaspora have changed enormously. This podcast series will reflect on these changes through the 9 different academic disciplines that are taught through Villanova's Center for Irish Studies. Our faculty and students will engage in discussions with distinguished thinkers, artists, writers, academics, political leaders, and other campus visitors.
This year, our central question will revolve around the changes the past 40 years have brought. Thank you so much for listening, and if you are in the area, please come to one of our events. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or email us at irishstudies@villanova.edu. Thank you, and enjoy.
Do you notice anything different about the soup?
Is this a quiz? If I get it right, do I get another bowl of soup?
I want you to get it right. That means what I did worked.
I'm going to get it wrong on purpose now.
For once in your life, can you be bloody normal?
I am normal, very normal.
Hello, everyone. I'm joined today by Owen McCafferty. Owen McCafferty is a playwright and a screenplay writer from Belfast. His first screenplay, called Ordinary Love, for Candleblinks Films and Out of Orbit, was shot in Belfast in 2018 and stars Liam Neeson and Leslie Manville. It is currently in and out of theaters, although theaters are closed at the moment. He's also currently working on a version of Dostoevsky's The Gambler and is working on his second screenplay, Breathing. I first got to know Owen when I saw his play Quietly in New York City, which was on tour with the Abbey Theater. And afterwards, Owen became the Heimbold Chair at Villanova University. In what year? That was 2017, 2018, Owen?
Yeah, that's 3 years ago, yeah, 17.
Yeah, and so Owen actually worked on a version of The Gambler when he was here at Villanova. And I thought today we could take some time to talk about his new film, Ordinary Love, and about some of the other work he's doing. So I thought, first off, Owen, if I may, I wanted to ask you a large question that I think Northern Irish writers often get asked, and that's about art and politics. The new film, Ordinary Love, is not a political film. It doesn't strike me as a political film, at least. It doesn't reference a lot of Northern Irish politics. But I wanted to ask you about that. Is that something that you consciously didn't want to bring in, or is this something that just wasn't part of the story? Have you been asked about why, or more politics or not in the film?
Well, that actually all, I think that stretches back to when I first started writing about 30 years ago. Because of the situation in Belfast or Northern Ireland at that time, I made a decision that the stories I wanted to tell, I didn't want one side or another of a sectarian divide to think that they owned them. Because once they did that, then the other side would think that they weren't about them. And that wasn't what I was trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean over the years that I haven't written about conflict here. I have.
Right. No, Quietly very much references it.
Well, yeah. But in the main, what I was attempting to do was tell a human story with that that as a backdrop. Yeah. So I just followed through with that thinking with Ordinary Love. But I mean, that aspect of life here didn't play, had nothing to do with that story at all.
Right.
I could easily have set that story in another city.
Yeah.
That wasn't an aspect of it.
Well, let's talk about I don't want to, give away too much that's in the film, but I think it's important to talk about that. It's about someone with breast cancer and about how that impacts a marriage. Do you want to, was there a personal side to this? Have you talked about the personal side to this?
Well, my wife Peggy had breast cancer. I think about 6 years ago now.
Hmm.
And I mean, she went through treatment for a year, and thankfully came out the other side of it. And she has now 6 years old, got the all clear. I hadn't ever thought about writing about that. It hadn't occurred to me until a friend of mine, David Holmes, who's a producer as well as other things, asked me, did I want to write a movie about it? And I mean, this would sort of happen quite frequently. We would go out for a drink, and he would ask me, and I would say no.
Right.
And
So this was brewing for a while,
yeah.
but yet it's the first screenplay that you wrote.
That was. I mean I mean, he's involved in movies, so it was always, from his point of view, was always going to be a movie. I hadn't thought about it in terms of a play because I wasn't going to write about it at all.
Right.
So the idea of it being a movie wasn't a strange thought to me.
Hmm.
You know, and actually, in many ways, because of how I thought I was going to do it, it suited being a movie far more. But anyway, he had asked me on numerous occasions, and I kept saying no. Again, we went out for another drink, and he had said again, and I went back and I started talking to Peggy about it and asked her if she thought it was a good idea, and she said, "Yeah, maybe you should do that. You know, maybe that's a good thing in itself." Because I had that sort of insider knowledge in a way, and that's how it all came about. I actually wrote the screenplay while I was at Villanova.
Oh, right. Yeah. The I remember when you were here, you were like, "I'm never going to write another play. I'm just going to do screenplays." Now,
Never say never.
yeah, never say never. But what struck me in seeing the movie, and seeing it, I went, and I was lucky to catch it in the cinema before this pandemic has shut down a lot of the cinemas across the country. But the characters are both written with great empathy, and we are inside both of them. Sometimes in a film, you're only inside one character. You have the main character. But in this film, we're really inside both the husband and the wife as they go through this, and we see both of their perspectives. That's something that I don't think is easy to manage. And I wondered, if you're coming at this, you're not really looking at just the male's perspective, just your own perspective. It took a great deal of empathy and to get inside your wife's head. I don't know. Get inside this character's head, I should say.
You would you would have to ask my wife whether I have the ability to get inside her head. Whenever I made the decision to do this, I made it clear that I wasn't going to write a cancer movie.
Mm.
I was going to write a movie about a middle-aged married couple who had already experienced some grief in their life.
Yeah.
And then had to experience a medical issue, which was the cancer. But I was always going to write it from their point of view as opposed to his point of view or her point of view.
Yeah.
So the movie then became a look at a long-term marriage and how that works.
You
and
really
that allowed you. That was the driving force to it,
right, right.
and that allowed you to deal with the cancer in it.
Yeah. You get that sense that you learn about the other characters from watching how you learn about the husband by seeing how the wife thinks about him and vice versa.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like a TikTok video where there's a couple and each couple, they're asked questions. Well, who's the more romantic? And they each point to the other person, or who cleans up first? And they both point to one of them. You're getting a sense, and both of them have their eyes closed. You're getting a sense that the characters know more about each other than sometimes the characters know about themselves.
Well, yeah. I mean, it has to work. If you're going to do something like that, it has to work on the level that, for want of a better phrase, a normal marriage would. You see, the way that the development of that was, you looked at them as a unit,
Mm-hmm.
and then you look at them as individuals, and that's where the cancer part of it fits in,
Right.
because the marriage part is them as a unit. The cancer part allows you to see them as individuals and how each one of them deals with this. And I think that gives it that feel of realism about it. And I mean, we did want to make a movie that was going to be, I don't know how to say this really, but I mean, that was going to be as real as we possibly could without making a documentary.
Yeah. And so the husband is Tom, and played by Liam Neeson, and Joan, played by Leslie Manville. They're watching this is very different than a documentary in that it's so artful, and the acting is so incredible. It brings us really in. I mean, you can see the turmoil of emotions that Tom is going through by the very small gestures that you would see on Tom's face, on Liam Neeson's face.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about. I mean, that I can understand how there's a documentary side to this, but it's an incredibly beautiful film with this. I was particularly moved by the soundtrack.
Yeah. No. All of it is superbly well put together.
And how much? So, what was it like for you in this process? I mean, as a playwright, you're used to directors taking your script and doing things with it. But was it the same in the film?
Well, no, I thought. Now this is nobody's fault. This is just the way things are. Because this is my first movie, I thought that I would be more involved in the shooting of it than I actually was.
Hmm.
Not even so much in that I wanted a direct input all the time, because I mean that isn't my job in all of this. I did think that I would hang about the set more than I did, and sort of get to know that part of it a bit more than I did, but it didn't. It sort of worked out the way it normally works out with movies. You write the script, you hand it to the director, and in this case, two directors, a husband and wife. They get on with it, and then you end up with a finished product.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't, in that sense, it isn't from a writing point of view. It isn't as hands-on as it is when you're in the theater.
Right. So both. I mean, I saw an interview with Liam Neeson and Leslie Manville, and they both commented on the writing and on the quality of the writing. Which,
I paid them well.
I've read the screenplay, but it's remarkable how much of it goes into the film without alteration. And there are some parts that were altered, I imagine, but I don't know what they are. Were there some?
No.
I mean,
there was bits taken out.
That I imagine that's a remarkable situation.
Well, you see, whenever that isn't such a strange thing for me, because whenever I'm writing a play, especially one that people would consider to be, again, for want of a better word, naturalistic, I don't imagine a stage. I don't imagine people are on a stage.
All right.
I see them in real life situations having conversations. So it was no different when I was doing the movie. And that's very useful.
No, but I imagine that, I mean, from reading it and seeing the film, that there's not a lot of script doctoring going on. I mean, there are people whose professions are to get screenplays and then change them to make it into a different film or into a better film or a more dramatic film. It doesn't seem like that happened at all here.
No, there was one meeting with the script editor.
Yeah.
And it was very informative from my point of view, in a general sense about how movies work from a script and that from a script point of view. But again, it has to do with, I think, as a writer, I'm quite sparse anyway. My dialogue's quite sparse, but it is to do with imagining people to be in a real situation. I mean, what you're doing is, I'm never, when I'm doing something like that, I'm writing dialogue and imagining the setting at the same time. I don't do them at different times. I don't think about that in different ways. They're both happening at the same time, which means that if that works well, the dialogue feels right given the setting it's in.
Right. And so why did you set it the way you did? There's a lot of internal scenes in interiors, rather. And we're inside the house a lot. There's beautiful shots of a house that doesn't strike me. I mean, I've been in a lot of houses in Ireland. It didn't strike me as a typical Irish house. It seemed,
well, it was a house in Belfast. I don't know. It was a typical house in Belfast.
I mean, who knows? From my perspective, it seemed very spacious.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think that as well was a technical issue regarding filming and things. You know, that there's a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
About that, so you need. They couldn't afford to build anywhere, from what I can gather, so they had to find somewhere. So you know, I think that was the technical aspect of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wanted to write it and set it as close to what actually happened. You know, like when Peggy was going through this, we spent a lot of time in the house and in the hospital.
Right.
And I wanted to be as honest and accurate about that, because I didn't, having started out not wanting to write it and then being, you know, then accepting that it was the right thing to do, I did want to be as honest about it as I could.
So what were some of the particular issues that came up? There's a lot in there about health, about smoking, about drinking tomato juice, about you know,
well,
there are a lot of health concerns that come up in the movie, and they're handled in a very sweet way, but in a funny way, but also in a kind of way like, this is a kind of desperate. Is it too late to get healthy?
All right. Well, no, that was more to do with the sort of, how do you put it? That's to do with how people talk to each other after they've been married for 30 odd years. You know, that's their code type of thing. That wasn't. I don't think those were actual real concerns. They
Yeah.
were more to do with just how that couple learned to live with each other. You
Yeah.
see, part of what was happening there was, and again, because you wanted this to be as real as it possibly could,
Mm.
they were learning. They had just got to a point where they were learning to live with the tragic death of their daughter that had happened. I can't remember, say about 5-10 years ago.
Right.
So they were just getting back to that point
Mm.
when we find out that the wife has cancer,
Right.
and so that's the journey they're on. And it struck me that what now this is, I mean, this is from my own experience. What Peggy and I decided to do, even if we didn't talk about this a lot, was the only way to get through this was to be as normal as we could.
Right. Well, and hence the title. I mean, the title of the screenplay was Normal People,
Normal people, yeah.
right? And so I think you do a beautiful job in capturing that. We really have a sense of actual people going through an actual struggle. There's not
Well, that's what it was. That's all I see.
it's not
Now,
loaded
that
with all
isn't.
of these messages about cancer or about, you know, promotional messages about health or other things. It doesn't, you don't feel that you've seen a movie and you've said, right, now I know what to do. I felt like when I saw this movie, I said, wow, that was real. I've lived through something, and it was incredibly cathartic, and it was also incredibly I just found it moving and funny. So
But you see, that's not because of the subject matter. I would want to write like that about anything.
mhm.
You know that.
So do you feel like there's you should have a message for your audience? Do you feel like there are times when you need to say, right, all you idiots out there, you shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing that? I mean, do you feel
No,
like you have a platform, that this is
no,
your own
no,
news channel?
no, never. Um, what I'm always trying to do, to the best of my ability, is just to describe something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to an audience what they take out of it.
Yeah. No,
But
yeah, go on.
certainly, well, that. I mean, I'm always striving to do that, whether it would be in a movie or in the theatre, or on the rare occasion that I write a piece of prose or something.
Hmm.
Um, I just want to describe what is happening.
Well, then what brings it to a level of art that goes beyond the documentary? What goes, I mean, there's a difference between writing history and writing um, a novel, or writing a journalistic piece about something that happened and describing it in a way that evokes it on an artful level. How do you see those? Do you see that division, or are you just immersed?
Well, no, there is. Well, for a start, you have your own style in doing things. So how somebody else does it may be different from you, and that plays a part.
Hmm. Hmm.
You do decide. I mean, part of the storytelling process in that it isn't just, although it may feel as if, you know, that's as real as it is, and you are still deciding what to put in it.
Yeah.
and what not to put in it.
Right.
And at
And so what?
I mean,
How do
look,
you make
at the
decisions?
end of the, I don't want to use the word entertainment here, because there's some things that you're doing and it doesn't seem like your job is to entertain people with them, but you are aware that there is an audience.
Yeah.
And I think that is important. I mean, look, there is, I suppose the difference is that in doing that, I was writing a screenplay that was showing the possibility of change.
Mm.
Now, I don't know whether you can say, I mean, that's an artistic concept or anything like that, but I mean, I know that that's the thing that was driving me to do it.
And when you say change, do you mean change for the characters, change that their lives are changing?
Yeah, there's just, at the very end, there's a small thing that happens. And you realize that change has happened to them.
Hmm.
That
They're in a different place now than they.
yes, and so you can see, you can make a bit more sense of what has happened to them because of the end result of it all.
Right.
And I think that that's the difference, as opposed to just following a real person around with a camera.
Yeah. So that something's happened by the end of it, and there's some.
Well, yeah, it is manipulative in that way.
Hmm.
Parts. I mean, parts of what you see in that movie are true. The vast majority of it's made up,
Mm-hmm.
except now, except for the treatment.
Yeah.
The treatment is as was.
I have to say, I mean, in watching it, you really have a sense that the curtain's been pulled back, and this is how a cancer treatment progresses for people like myself who've not experienced that or seen that up close. In the sense of being inside the hospital. I wonder about if you have, just to change topic a tiny bit or steer in a different direction, if when you teach and you talk to students, and when you were at Villanova and you talked with students, what would you tell them to focus on in terms of this film or in terms of making a film? What kind of advice would you give? What should they focus on? What should they leave in? What should they leave out?
I think, well, that I'm not really sure how to answer that because it feels like a big question. It You see, I want I right. All I can say about in writing that movie was that I wanted to be. I knew that you end up with something that's made up, but I wanted that made up thing to be as accurate as I could possibly make it, and I also wanted it to be focused.
Yeah.
So I think the starting point of anything is to have a clear sense of what it is you want to talk about or what it is you want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
You need that needs to be focused from the start. You can't just go into something thinking that you have a rough notion of what it might be and things will come together. I think that you're far better off having a very direct, concrete idea of what you want something to be, because that allows you to start it. And once you've started it, you can maneuver it and position it in different ways. But you need to start it, and you need to know what you're doing when you start it. And you also, I think, need to know the end of it when you start it,
Right.
because that allows you to get there. Now, again, that may change, but it just means that you can maneuver your way through the story more accurately. I think you can you can your thoughts about it can be more concrete, sort of foundational, direct, which are always good to fall back on. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't change things. You're always changing things.
Right.
You do need something.
The direction.
Yes, always. Because other than that, you're never sure what it's about. You see, this is right. This is a difficult question to answer, I think, for anybody who's involved in sort of any artistic endeavor. If somebody says, "What is that about?" Because to the person creating it, it could be about more than one thing.
Yeah, of
It
course.
could be quite expansive. It can be a whole range of things. But if you do have in your head a sort of a single notion about what you're trying to do, it does give you a foundation upon which to build.
And
You know, there's no, you see, and I think what,
yeah,
you're right, it's like this. If somebody comes up to you as an academic and a teacher and has a very strong sense and says, "I want to be a writer," I think the next thing to say to them, which is equally important, good, you need to find out now what it is you want to write about.
yeah, sure. I'm thinking also of students who are writing longer pieces or are used to writing poetry or writing fiction, but have never thought about writing a dramatic scene.
Well, I mean, I can only say, I suppose, the process that I go through. I hear those conversations in my head,
Yeah,
and more often than not, I speak them out.
sure.
But I do. You see, look, I suppose the way to think about that is, I start off writing a whole lot of notes about what I may want to write about, and then when you get to the story and you start populating it, it's at that point, because it's a play or a movie and there's dialogue in it, you need to hear it. You need to hear that inside your head. But actually, there's not a great deal of difference between that and writing prose, because you do need to have that rhythm in prose as well.
True.
You know,
I think that you have less description in a play or in a screenplay.
yeah. Well, you have less description in a stage play. You have quite a bit more description in a movie.
Yeah.
But still not anywhere near what you would have if you were writing a novel. But there is. I mean, I don't know whether these things make any sense or what. You do need to have a feel for the world that you're going to enter into. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to know everything right from the start. You don't, but you need to have a feel for the people that are going to populate your story.
Right.
You do need to know them, and you need to want to spend time with them. I know this is gonna, and I hate things like this. This is gonna sound absolutely dreadful, but and I'm sure somebody said this to me, and whenever they said it to me, I went, "Oh Jesus Christ!" But uh, if you as a writer don't want to spend time with the people you're writing about, the people who are reading it won't either.
That's a good point. Let me ask you on as a last question about your new film project or the screenplay that you're working on called Breathing. This is about a fire rescue worker, a fireman,
Yeah.
and in Northern Ireland. What's your way into this? What's the world that you inhabit here? Is this is not this is a character? Is this somebody you know? Is this something?
No. There was it has taken quite a while actually for the story of that to come together. Quite a few years ago, I had a notion that I wanted to make a movie about somebody running a marathon.
Right.
And what I was going to do was get a friend of mine who does run marathons to strap a camera to his forehead and run the marathon. And then I was going to add an internal monologue to that.
All right.
Now,
That's documentary.
yeah, and that's why it never. That's why I never really followed through, even though I was always keen on the idea to do something on the marathon. I just liked the idea of a person completing that,
Right.
especially a person who wasn't used to running. Not a professional marathon runner.
Yeah.
Somebody who did it for other reasons. So that was always floating about in my head. And then there was a tragedy at a tower block in London, a fire. Where a lot of people were killed in it, and the fire chief was on it, and she was talking about firefighters who go in to fires like this and what they see and how that affects them. And I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about a fireman who had been involved in a fire, and something tragic had happened in that. And since then, he had started. He had gone off the rails, and that had affected the relationship with a woman that he loves and loves him. And what I then sort of put together with that was when he was a firefighter, he used to be part of the firefighting marathon team.
No.
And now 5 years on, he was an alcoholic that drank in the same bar most of the time. And I wanted to set this on the day of the marathon.
Ah.
So I did that. So, and there are other stories involved in this because there's about 8 or 9 sort of main characters in it. So you're looking at different aspects of things. But halfway through the movie, he's sitting outside the bar, and which is on the marathon route, and firefighters that he knows pass.
Yeah.
And they stop and talk to him, and they jokingly said he should start running, and he starts running. And then the second half of the movie becomes about him running the marathon on his own.
All right.
And getting to the finish of it.
Well, it sounds like a great film.
Well, Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
It's just up to me to balls it up, you know. But that's how that all came about. But that has taken. I mean, I have just finished the first draft of that about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Hmm.
I first had the thought about the guy filming the guy running the marathon maybe 10 years ago, maybe more.
Wow.
So that's how that all.
I can see it does take time. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. There's, yeah. I mean, things are once you make this is once you make a decision that your full-time job, so to speak, is going to be a writer, things occur to you all the time about what you should have done with pieces of work that you finished years ago. You know, that's how long it may take for something to come out. And what can be very frustrating about that is there's nothing you can do about it at that stage.
Yeah.
Because it exists in its own right. But again, that's a good thing in the sense that it means that it's part of your life and it's an ongoing process.
Right.
That's the way it should be.
Well, Owen, thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
It's my pleasure, Joseph.
There's a lot here, and I'm looking forward to seeing Breathing when it comes out.
There isn't a moment I won't be there with you. I'm going to torture you. You know that, don't you?
Torture me now.